Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear students, the next topic in your MBBS first year course is water, pH, and buffers. This unit, as the name is indicating, is comprised of three portions. In the first one portion, we will be discussing about the concepts of water, its ionization, its pH, and its distribution in different body compartments, and the pathologies which are associated with the increase or decrease amount of water. The second portion of the unit is dealing with the pH based concepts. What is pH, pOH, pKa value, dissociation constants of acids and bases, along with different titration related concepts. The third one and last one portion that is very much important clinically is the concepts of buffers and the types of buffers which are working in intracellular compartment, in extracellular compartment, and different lines of defense which will be playing their important and vital role to compensate the pH changes in the body, or in other words to regulate the acid base balance. So in this regard, the first one topic in your curriculum is ionization of water, weak acids, bases, pH and pH scale, the concept of pH and related topics, along with the determination of pH and concept of isoelectric point or isoelectric pH, that is represented by Pi. The next one topic is pKa, dissociation constant Ka, similarly titration curves of weak acids, and determination of pH of buffers, Henderson-Hasselbalch equation along with its application, but its derivation is not required. Last one category of this unit is associated with the body buffer systems, and there are three important buffers in the body. Bicarbonate buffer, that is predominant and important buffer of extracellular compartment. Ammonia buffer, that is closely associated with the renal system. Phosphate buffer, which is predominant buffer of ICF, which is intracellular fluid. And lastly, protein buffer system, in which we will discuss about plasma protein buffering action and hemoglobin buffering capacity, that is the protein which is present in the red blood cells. And we will be discussing their chemical nature, their mechanism of action, and their link with the pH changes. Is very common, that is about the water functions, water properties, physiochemical parameters, and its distribution in the body compartments. Water is a universal solvent. It's a best aqueous medium in which a lot of reactions are taking place, like photosynthesis, respiration. It is also acting as a direct reactant. It's a good solute transporter, very good temperature regulator due to the high heat of vaporization, due to the high heat of capacity. And similarly, it has a good quality of dissolving digestive juices in it, dissolution of enzymes, coenzymes, and other smaller biomolecules. Water is also helping to excrete the waste metabolic products from the body. Abnormalities of water quantity and amount in the body may lead to two pathologies. Deficiency of water will produce dehydration, while the excess water amount will lead to the condition that is known as edema or water intoxication, like pulmonary edema and cardiac fluid that is present in the heart cavity. Structure of water, as all of you know, there are two hydrogen atoms, one oxygen atom, and the molecular weight of water molecule is 18, and it has a bent structure with 104.5 degree angle, and both the atoms of hydrogen and oxygen are bonded through a strong covalent bond. Uh, in regard to physiochemical and biological properties of water, in addition to the polar nature of water molecule, it also keeps the ability of diffusion and osmosis. If there is no water in the body, there will be no more transport of solutes, fluids, and there will be no process of osmosis and transport of materials across the membranes. As water dissociate into equal amount of hydrogen and hydroxyl ions, so pH of water is neutral. pH of water will be changed when we add any acid and base into it, and this pH variation will be resisted if we add buffer, as a buffer is a mixture of weak acid and its salt with a strong base. Water has a high heat of vaporization and the value is 2260 joules per gram. Density of water is highest at 4 degree temperature, 4 degrees centigrade, and ice will be lighter than water because structure of ice is porous. Because there are spaces in water molecules while it is in the form of ice, when it is in frozen form, so ice will float on the surface of water, and this property is very much helpful for the survival of marine life. Non-ionic, uncharged but polar molecule, their behavior in water. We can take the example of sugar, we can take the example of alcohol, which show the behavior of polar molecule, but they are non-ionic and uncharged. Hydrogen bonding is responsible for their dissolution in the water. If we talk about amphipathic molecules like soaps, detergents, and cleansing agents, their action is based upon two types of groups. One is polar and one is non-polar. Non-polar hydrocarbon long chain and polar carboxylic acid group that is present at the end. Both groups will play their role in cleansing action due to their non-polar portion and polar portion. The cleansing action will be very efficient. Now we come towards the distribution of water in the body compartments. A healthy 70 kg person would have around 42 liter water in his or her body. In adult men, the total quantity of water is 55 to 70%. In adult women, 45 to 60%. This 70% or 42 liter is subdivided into two major compartments. Intracellular fluid, that is 50% of that 70%, and the volume will be 28 liters. Extracellular fluid, that is 14 liter and 20% of that 70%. This fluid is subdivided into two categories. One is interstitial fluid, that is present in the tissues, and the amount will be 10.5 liter, 15% of total 20%. And similarly, one is plasma, that total amount of water in plasma is 3.5 liter, and that quantity is 5% of that 20% of ECF. It means intracellular fluid is 28 liter and extracellular fluid is 14 liter. Out of that 14 liter fluid that is present in extracellular compartment, 11 liter is interstitial fluid that is present in the tissues, and 3 liter is present in the form of plasma. It is achieved by maintaining a balance. Balance means if the quantity of water is not normal between all these body compartments, fluid compartments, there will be pathologies. If decreased water is present in the body, it will lead to dehydration. If there is more excess water present, it will lead to water intoxication, edema, swelling, and overhydration. And we will discuss in detail what are the clinical conditions which will affect this pathology. Now we want to talk about the water cycle and water turnover, and in this regard we should know the sources of water, that are exogenous and endogenous. Exogenous mean external route, endogenous mean internal route. Both exogenous and endogenous sources are related to water intake, and water intake along with water output will make the whole water turnover and water cycle. A total of 1500 ml liquid intake of water is there in 24 hours, and 700 ml water comes from solid food stuff. 300 ml water is being formed by the body as a result of metabolism of different macromolecules which we intake as a food. So the total quantity which is coming in the body is 2500 ml. And if we talk about the exogenous source, that is liquid water intake along with solid food stuff. Endogenous water is the metabolic water that is being formed in the body. Regulation of body water, that is done by the three hormones, three parameters: aldosterone, which is responsible for retention of sodium. Kidney secretes this hormone by the adrenal cortex gland, and adrenal gland will secrete aldosterone and it will retain sodium, and sodium will retain water. ADH is antidiuretic hormone that is secreted from posterior pituitary gland, and this hormone is responsible for retention of water. Renin is a proteolytic enzyme that is involved in the regulation of body water and blood pressure as well, ultimately affecting the volume of ECF, which is being disturbed during the variation of blood pressure. If we talk about the total amount of water that is produced by the body against the consumption of food molecule, 1 gram carbohydrate will provide 0.6 ml of water. 1 gram protein provides 0.4 ml of water. 1 gram fat will provide 1.1 ml of water. So a total of 125 ml water will be produced against each 1000 calories that are consumed by the body per day. Now, as far as water output is concerned, there are 4 major routes from which the water is removed from the body. The major one route is urine, and by this route 1 to 2 liters of water is passed away from the body in a healthy individual. Urine production cannot be stopped at all, and there is a minimum amount of volume of water that is at most required to excrete the waste products from the body, and that amount is known as minimum excretory volume, and the volume is 500 ml. Urine production in the body is hormonally controlled. The hormone that is responsible for urine production and for the amount of water in the body is ADH, vasopressin, antidiuretic hormone that is secreted from posterior pituitary gland. And secretion of this hormone is regulated by osmotic pressure of plasma. And that osmotic pressure of plasma is dependent upon the amount of a mineral, that is sodium. If amount of sodium will be high in the plasma, there will be high plasma osmolality, there will be increased secretion of ADH, and increased secretion of ADH will ultimately lead to more and more water reabsorption from the kidney tubules, and that will lead to less urine output ultimately. On the other hand, low plasma osmolality, that is due to the low amount of sodium in the plasma, it will lead to less secretion of ADH, resulting in less water reabsorption from the kidney tubules, and it will result in more urine output. A disease, diabetes insipidus, is caused by the deficiency of ADH hormone, in which posterior pituitary gland releases less amount of ADH, leading to less water conservation in the body, resulting into more frequent urination and ultimately dehydration. Second route for water removal from the body is skin, and the total amount of water that is going out through this course is 450 ml per day on average, and this is by the course of perspiration, sweating. This phenomenon is depending upon the environmental conditions, temperature, humidity level, fever. If there is fever, there will be 15% more loss of water from the body than normal. If there is high temperature, high humidity level, loss of water would be more. These parameters also apply on the third route of water excretion, that is lungs, and it is in the form of respiration. And total quantity of water that is going out in this way is 400 ml per day through expired air. And again, fever, warm temperature, humidity level, it all will affect the amount of water that is excreted from the respiration. Fourth and last route of water excretion from the body is feces, and the total amount that is going out by this way is 150 ml. And ultimately, if the person is suffering from dehydration, if the person is suffering from constipation, this amount of water excretion may be variable, as in dehydration, as in diarrhea, not dehydration, diarrhea. In diarrhea, the amount of water loss would be more than normal, and in constipation, the amount of water loss will be less than normal. There is another term that is known as insensible water loss. It's the combination of both quantities, that is water loss from the perspiration by the skin, water loss from the respiration by the lungs, and total amount is 850 ml. Obligatory water loss is the combination of four amounts of water: skin 450 ml, lungs 400 ml, feces 150 ml, and minimum excretory volume, that is 500 ml. And so the total amount of obligatory water loss is roughly 1500 ml. This flow chart is showing the overall water turnover, including both intake and output. Drinking water and beverages, plain water intake, the total quantity is roughly 1500 ml or 1.5 liter. Solid foodstuff will provide 700 ml water on average. Metabolic water in the form of endogenous water is 300 ml, and total is 2500 ml. Water output from urine, that is the major route of water excretion, there is a loss of 1500 ml water on average per day. From skin 400 ml water, from lungs, from skin 450 ml, from lungs 400 ml, from feces 150 ml, and so again the water output is 2500 ml. So this is the water cycle and overall water regulation in the form of water intake and water output. Now we will talk about abnormal water metabolism, that is in two forms: dehydration and water intoxication. At first we will discuss about dehydration, that is the loss of water from the body. There are three primary types of dehydration. Number one, loss of pure water, that is known as primary dehydration. Number two, loss of electrolytes, that is known as secondary dehydration. And number three, loss of both, that is known as mixed dehydration. So primary dehydration is the depletion of water due to decreased water intake. It may be due to the increased water loss, or it may be due to the both conditions. So we can say in primary dehydration there is the loss of only pure water, not salt. No parallel loss of salt will be considered in primary dehydration. The causes that are affiliated with primary dehydration are less water intake is stopped, there is inadequate water supply, and the person may be severely ill that he or she cannot move to drink water. There is any throat problem that water cannot be swallowed. The person may be lost in desert where there is no availability of water. All these parameters will lead to ultimately deficiency of pure water in the body, that is known as primary dehydration. In this condition, volume of ECF will be normal at the expense of ICF. It means ECF will maintain its volume by extracting the water from the intracellular environment, and this is the point when the person will feel thirst due to intracellular dehydration. Secondary dehydration causes excessive sweating, diarrhea, vomiting, adrenal cortex dysfunction, loss of fluids in the burns, failure of kidney, ADH deficiency. Excessive sweating will lead to loss of electrolytes. Diarrhea can be the cause of secondary hydration, can be the cause of mixed dehydration, primary dehydration, depending upon the severity of water loss or electrolytes lost. These are the generalized causes of dehydration. They may occur in primary dehydration, they may occur in secondary as well as mixed dehydration. And the most common type of dehydration is normally mixed type of dehydration, in which loss of both water as well as electrolytes is observed. Now we talk about degrees of dehydration. There are 3 levels of dehydration. Mild dehydration, in which thirst is the main feature. Moderately severe dehydration, in which thirst along with dry mouth, along with oliguria, that is a deficient urine production. Very severe dehydration, that is the combination of above 2 features along with the diminution of physical and mental capabilities, intellectual disability is compromised, and delirium, which is known as abnormal mental state. Secondary dehydration. In secondary dehydration, there is major salt loss. No parallel loss of water is seen in this case. And it will take place when we will replenish the body fluid by normal water without any salt. So this condition can also be called as sodium depletion, electrolyte deficiency, salt deficiency. The causes which will be responsible to cause the deficiency of sodium in the body, deficiency of salt and electrolyte in the body is excessive sweating. Number 2, use of salt-free diet. Similarly, loss of gastrointestinal fluids like in vomiting, like in diarrhea, cholera, and fistulas, that are holes and openings in the ducts. Like if there is hole in bile duct, it will be biliary fistula. If there is hole in pancreatic duct, it will be pancreatic fistula. That will lead to loss of electrolytes from the body. Urinary loss of sodium, that is seen in a disease which is a hormonal defect, Addison disease. And in Addison disease, there will be less amount of aldosterone. When there is less aldosterone, it will retain less sodium, and sodium will retain less water. So there will be secondary dehydration. Diabetic acidosis, because more and more keto acids will be produced in these conditions. So more and more alkali reserve will be utilized, and alkali reserve is sodium bicarbonate. That will lead to ultimately deficient sodium in the body. Similarly, chronic renal disease, that will lead to loss of bicarbonate along with sodium from the body. And use of diuretics, that is very direct cause in which sodium and electrolytes will be lost from the body due to more urination. Now we move towards the symptoms of dehydration. High pulse rate, sunken eyeballs, because there is less interstitial fluid, so skin tissue will be shrunken. Low blood pressure due to the less volume of plasma, due to the less amount of water in the ECF. Lethargy, because there is no more normal circulation, so no more energy in the body. Low skin turgor due to the deficient amount of water. Ultimately, if all these conditions are untreated, it will lead to coma and death. The clinical and biochemical findings that are associated with dehydration is reduction of ECF volume, and in secondary dehydration, there will be deficiency of sodium. Thirst is not a striking feature, so absence of thirst is negative finding. This is for secondary dehydration, because in secondary dehydration, thirst is not the main parameter that will differentiate primary dehydration from secondary one. Anorexia and nausea. It will increase sodium depletion. How? Because in anorexia there will be vomiting. It is a eating disorder, and this reflux will cause the loss of sodium chloride, and it will ultimately lead to sodium deficiency. And sodium deficiency is known as secondary dehydration, and loss of electrolyte from the body will lead to cramps, reduced plasma volume, and it can lead to oligemic shock and death. Oligemic shock is the reduced amount of ECF, reduced amount of plasma, ultimately leading to less level of circulation. We will talk about mixed dehydration in our next lecture. Thank you very much.